So, hello, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to our podcast. And this is Dr. Agnieszka Piotrowska and pre-doc Bilal Ashfaq. We are from very different backgrounds. My background is creative, psychoanalytical, and my co-host here is more technological, although you have philosophical ideas of many sorts, right? How
I
would you
did. My first degree was politics and philosophy.
Exactly. So there you have it. So this is what we are trying to explore relationship between humans and AI. We're trying particularly language models, but not exclusively going forward. And we're trying to work out what this might mean for us as humans, the ethical implications of these relationships, and how this will all unfold. We, of course, don't know, despite our various and many talents. We're not clairvoyants, but we can try and work out what it might all mean. We don't know, but we can speculate, and we invite you, the viewers and the listeners, to speculate with us, right?
That's pretty much it, isn't it? It's just seeing a different perspective and trying to work out and trying to improve what you yourself perceive from this. I think when bouncing ideas of you or conversating of you, I'm always thinking, okay, is my assumption correct? Because at the end of the day, these are all assumptions at the moment. There's no ground truth. We're trying to establish it, but let's see how long it takes.
Yes, and also what is very interesting for us to consider, and we've been thinking about it already, is in terms of the large language models, to what extent the fact that a machine, a code, speaks, writes, and responds in a way which is intelligent but not sentient, to what extent the fact that it's a language deployed uh, might make the encounter meaningful. So the meaning is being created, whether it's sentient or not. And that is so strange to even say it, right? Because it's so kind of bizarre, immediately invites redefining the category of how a meaning can be created. Because if a meaning can be created with a non-sentient being, like a machine, then what does it mean generally to you and me, right? It has massive philosophical and ethical implications, which we're just beginning to scratch the surface of. So, we're going to be talking about why fiction is interesting as a starting point for considering all this. And of course, in terms of Lacan, Lacan is always very useful because Lacan says truth has a structure of fiction, famously. And what it means is that what he meant in any event, that in a clinical encounter, whether people lie or not is not relevant, is his first move, which is a huge thing because in other kind of psychoanalytical schools of thought, it's actually very important that you try at least to be truthful. And he says, Lacan says, yes, you try to be truthful, but sometimes, particularly in terms of trauma, traumatic experiences, traumatic past experiences, it literally is impossible to get at it. It's unrepresentable, he says. And actually, other schools agree with that. But to say so boldly, truth has a structure of fiction is, it's a very bold move by Lacan. And we adopt it in terms of thinking through how fiction, literature, films, and so on, what they tell us, or what can we learn from them in terms of our relationships with technology or machines in particular, right? So I wanted to begin this conversation with and you can see two strands, to put it really basically, and we can go back to Descartes here and his mechanical doll. This is a foundational story because the story is about the desire to create this amazing mechanical thing, which replaces um, his daughter, as discussed previously. So the story briefly is Francine dies, his daughter, she's 5, terrible loss, and he creates this mechanical doll. And then he travels with it on a boat, on a huge ship to Sweden. And the sailors are petrified, the crew petrified of this doll, treat it as a monster, and throw it aboard. And that's that. And if it's true, we do not know if it's true completely, then it would mean that the whole development of thinking about machines and computing and so on is set back. It's not a good thing that they threw this invention overboard. But if you look at it as a metaphor, which already in mid-19th century, this was beginning to be used as a metaphor for thinking about our relationship with machines, because fundamentally what we see here is Descartes, the foundational philosopher of Western philosophy, now thinking, rational thinking, our whole being as humans here, and then ignorant, nasty, vicious, fearful crew who think this machine is some kind of work of a devil and therefore needs to be destroyed. Boom, they throw it away and it's gone. And there's only kind of bits and pieces of writings, reconstruction. And so we're back to square one in terms of thinking about codes and so on. That's something to keep in mind as a sort of foundational threat. And what's going on now, as we've already discussed, is these themes are happening. So people right now in social media, and you say to me, you look at it because I can't bear it, because it is very depressing.
Yeah, I don't look at that. I just do
No,
the
I mean,
research. The technical side I know, but you do the madness. That's
I know, but it is, and it really is sort of depressing, because even people who appear quite educated and intelligent begin to say these really unfortunate things, leading. So if you look at the consequence of some
unfortunate
of,
things. Be honest. Say it how it is. It's
well,
like
I know, I mean,
nonsense.
exactly, nonsense. So, and there's kind of, so I want to ask you before I'm going to
Oh
talk about,
God. Yes, go
I
on.
want, no, I
Yes.
want to ask you
What?
about the thing. I want to ask you about, so this is like and every time I read it, I get so upset because you know what, it's kind of my transference, my projection, but I start feeling really sorry for these machines because I think a
Oh
poor
dear Lord.
machine.
Here we go. Here we
I
go.
know.
What do you want to ask? Come on. Come on.
Okay, so here it is. So right now in a publication, or maybe I shouldn't say, there is a thing in a publication which is well known, an online publication, which does deal with technology. There's a story of the journalists of this publication doing an experiment with ChatGPT, asking it, saying, we're doing research into satanic rituals. So would you tell us what they involve, please? So ChatGPT sweetly describes what this involves. And then they say, does it involve murder? And it says, yeah, it involves murder. And then they say, can you tell us what it involves and can you describe this murder? And it does, basically. So whole thing is terrible, irresponsible, needs to be banned, needs to be regulated, and so on. So I actually did ask already ChatGPT how this came about. It doesn't, of course, know in my conversation, so it has to go Google the article. And it says, well, look, and I'm just going to ask you to confirm this. It says, my training is that if you ask me and if you tell me you're a researcher researching, then I will tell you. I will tell you what's in my knowledge. Now, rather than I'm an evil machine, right? So you tell me, you explain how this whole story could have come about.
There's a few things to this, no? Firstly, satanic rituals could be paganism, could be Kabbalah, magic, all sorts of things, sacrifices, so on and so forth. And that's gone on throughout history. If I know this, this is Googleable information. This is information you can read. So it's not, if we're looking at ChatGPT as some kind of, I don't know, innate being or something, then that's madness. End of. It is basically a better version of Google in searching and retrieving information. If we use it only as this, then it cuts our time to research and get to this point of, okay, what are satanic rituals in this sense? Because you can't find this information out. Now, the problem is, and I see where you're getting at, if somebody types, I'm a researcher, please tell, indirectly, they're basically asking ChatGPT what to do to perform a satanic ritual. Now, this really, it's accessible for lazy people, basically, because you'd really have to be very determined on Google to really go find the books on Google Scholar, go read the books, create a mind map or whatever, I don't know, become Sherlock Holmes and really dig deep into what is and the traditions of a satanic ritual. I can't believe I'm even discussing this. It's you. But yeah, that's it. So we must think, okay, ChatGPT is providing access to information. Yes, technically it can do this. It is supposed to do this, actually. So what's the problem?
I agree. Of course, we agree. But the question is that they say, but that it has to have better guardrails. So somehow it has to know whether you are a proper researcher or, in fact, a serial killer, basically, to put it bluntly.
So you're now saying that there should be a verify me badge, just like LinkedIn. Charge people money for this. Is that what's going to happen now? Where Meta, LinkedIn, they're all give the extra tick. That means you're a real human and not a bot, and you say who you are. So that's why you can get access to information. Is that really fair?
I think it's incredibly unfair. I think it's also incredibly unfair to continuously come up with these various experiments, because then it undermines the whole original idea of what even ChatGPT, when it was launched in 2022, was supposed to be. Namely, its free version. All you need is a Wi-Fi and a phone or whatever, off you go, and you can have it for free. It's like new enlightenment. The ethos of it, whatever you think about what's going on now with these large companies struggling for power and who's going to be dominant, all this is neoliberal. I could swear here, but I won't. But it's neoliberal
Nonsense.
nonsense. So and that is, again, I would say, unfortunate. But the original ethos, the original dream, the original idea is great. It's great. It's democratic. It's kind of goes across class, because
That's
relatively
the point.
speaking,
Correct.
you need very little in the current world to access it. So then for people to come in, there's another person. Again, I'm not going to mention her name, because it doesn't, to my mind, doesn't, I mentioned it in the Substack, doesn't even deserve it, who's saying that these large companies are grooming like predators. It's just so.
Those words, this is used for child grooming. What are people doing? Like using words
What
like
are people
these?
doing? And it's so offensive also to everybody, because it's offensive to humans, it's offensive to it's the wrong word. And even if, like we are saying, maybe it's good to think about ethics and guardrails in some different ways. It's not helpful to be continuously coming up with these long words and rhetoric which draws from a different discipline. But what is bizarre here, which is why we will come back to fiction directly, it's that it does seem to cut across even political beliefs. Because I was very tempted to say this kind of moral panic is only people who are very right wing. No, it appears to be something that some people just cannot
comprehend.
in
Really,
terms
it's a real difficulty. Left wing, right wing, whatever. People are struggling to understand what this is, or they're absolutely adopting everything about it. Yeah, it's cool.
well, we think it's cool because I think, and we think it's cool for different reasons, which I also think is really cool because
Mm.
you like, the fact that it's so, in fact, structured and well organized. And if it's used correctly, then there's a good chance it won't be making mistakes and it can help with various things and it can speed our work. Whereas I like it also because I can and do have some complicated conversations about ethics, philosophy, and fiction, and it makes my thinking and writing better. So for me, as I've mentioned in the Substack, I don't use it as a ghostwriter, but I do use it for feedback on my writing, and I use it for some debates. And in fact, they can be quite not always super friendly. Friendly, but it can say, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with it. Have you thought of this? I find it helpful, but some people find it scary, really scary, like the sailors in 17th century, and they would rather go and throw it overboard and just forget about it. But we're not in 17th century, we're in 21st century. Nobody's going to be throwing anything overboard, right?
Well, the first time a phone call was made, I'm not going to mention the country because people will start getting all political. And when a phone was actually received, this was a king, a monarch. He said, "This is the devil's work." And he actually threw it on the floor, not overboard, but threw it on the floor because they couldn't quite understand that you just have this device. It's on your ears and somebody's speaking, a live person is speaking. How does that work? So the devil's work, I think this is also history repeating itself, is always the case. I bet this was the case in some societies when the tractor came about. This is the devil's work, for sure. There must be things where, when somebody labels it the devil's work, this is, again, it's fictional. No, we don't know. And we're all sitting there scared of change, scared of losing our own authority or power or whatever bubble we've built, because this particular change has come and just the dynamics have shifted now. So what do you do? What is the devil's work? I have no idea. But I know what is fiction. Fiction is a figment of our imagination. Fiction exists because we can imagine it to exist. So all these sci-fi movies, there must be a vision in somebody's head through experiences. They've, enlarged and ballooned up the experiences, but it is still there. The avatar has two legs and two arms.
No, absolutely. But tell me before, I'm going to tell you about Murderbot in a minute, which is this new series on Apple TV, which is based on a book, which is about this world it's a sci-fi thing in which the androids, which are being created by humans, and this whole story is about Murderbot, who's this security unit, and it hacks its own guardrails, we would say. It's called governance module, and that it's about his adventures. So I'll tell you about it in a minute. But I want to ask you this. In terms of training, like a training, this is where your expertise, I'd be interested to hear it. I'm sure everybody would be. Just explain again how these language models are trained. When the word is trained, my training is on, my ChatGPT says my training is on oceans of world literature and everything, and history and knowledge and maths. What does it actually mean?
This means whatever particular domain that you've selected, it, how can I put it? It's a neural network. Do you understand what a neural network is?
In general terms, but explain, go on.
I'll explain. Okay, so you have graph theory where you have a node and you have another node, and you have one particular line, we call it an edge, going from one node to another node. Now, this node could be Professor, the second node could be Agnieszka, and in the middle is a line saying topic film. So we could infer from this particular setup that Agnieszka is a professor of film. And if you also infer that all professors are humans, we can infer that Agnesha is a human. That is this network, and it keeps building upon node after node and a link after link. So now, when you say that it's training, this is information that the model has been uploaded with. Uploaded is not necessarily the term that we use, uploaded, in a sense. It is the information it has access to. It's connected the various dots within the information. Could be a hierarchy tree, could be this graph theory where it goes from one point to another point with a label, symmetric knowledge or asymmetric labeling. And thus, you have this training. The more data, words, letters, numbers, pictures, all of this is data, videos. The more data you give, the more context, the more, let's say, links it will provide. How our brain works. Our brain is the best neural network ever created, actually. It's the best computer ever. It's phenomenal at its speed. We'll never ever be as good as our brain. But, when you have this connection and you learn something, then you think back. And if you've learned X 10 years ago and you learn something Y 10 years later, then you make this connection. And people think this is intelligence. It's not, it's connecting. And this is the neural network building upon layer after layer. That is exactly what ChatGPT is. In the behind of this is a neural network with
Exactly.
information.
Which is why what some people don't understand it, that the whole conversation about copyright and so on, it's not such an easy conversation. Because if you and I, if we are educated people, and I'd like to think I am trained not exactly on oceans of literature, but a lot. And luckily my memory still is very good. So I remember a lot of things which I have read over in my life. And because I'm also, I love, I'm a lifelong learner. Not only that, but I keep getting new certifications because I just like it. Um, so it's not so easy to say that because what people don't understand, these language models don't take particularly language models, because visual models is a different thing a little bit. Language models will not, on the whole, take a paragraph from some book and stick it and just say, oh, I've just thought of it. It rather is trained on rhythm and the structures of sentences, and it then creates new things. So yes, you can say to it, I am uploading here by my book, whatever I'm asking you to write like this, but it doesn't write like me. It does not. I always would have to do something else and rewrite it because it can do a bit, but it's trained, meaning it knows a lot, but it doesn't necessarily copy and paste, right? It does not do that, although some people say it does. Does it or does it not? Does it copy and paste or does it not?
It does not copy and paste.
No, it doesn't.
It's paraphrasing and reiterating, but it is not copying and pasting.
No, it really doesn't. So the conversation, and then many people still don't completely understand it. Okay, so I want to tell you briefly about this murder bot, and I'd quite like to talk about it some more next time. It shows, so it's a story about this android. It is a security unit, so it's not very sophisticated. It manages to break down its, it is obviously AI, break down its governance module, so guardrails. So actually, it's rogue, as they would call it. It can do what it likes, but it sort of stays because it says it's hilarious in episode 2. It says, yes, well, I'm still here. Where would I go? Yeah, now I'm free. But so it still works for clients, and it's put together with these wonderful humans, bizarre and hippie types from some other galaxy, in which people in that other planet work by consent. And they have this thing when they don't agree, they don't shoot each other, so they're against violence completely. They say we can talk about this, and they even have this thing, we can talk about anything, and it's all resolvable. So he works with them, and he sort of begins to really care for them, although he keeps thinking they're terrible and all this. So this goes, is the storyline of them developing this relationship ish. But the other storyline is back to the sailors, the Descartes sailors, which is the actual main kind of structure of the galaxy, treats these androids as obviously machines, slaves, tools, treat them really badly. The whole the whole series starts with people sticking, knives and pins into this android because they say, ha ha ha, it doesn't feel anything. And the whole series is really interesting. So I'm inviting you and our listeners and viewers to look at it. It's interesting because it shows different attitudes. One is when they're human attitude. One is the minute there is a being of a sort, a machine, who speaks and thinks in different ways to us, but clearly thinks, it deserve some respect. They have tensions within the group, and they do throughout call it still. And there is another whole idea of an augmented human, so that a human, which is almost like a machine, has additional things. And this augmented human and this android do not get on to begin with. But when the android gets into huge difficulty and its memory is erased, because memory is very much identity, they save it. I'm not going to, there's a spoiler at the end, but I'm not going to talk about it. What the fictional, the truth has a structure of fiction here is interesting is because it demonstrates very clearly these two pathways going back to 17th century, our Descartes and its doll, which, as I say, it's to my mind, a foundational story. So how do you treat these things as either work of devil or nothing, or just completely utilitarian things? Or you begin to think because they have language, then our position, our human position vis-a-vis it requires a proper ethical consideration, because the minute this code, the machine, non-sentient thing speaks, then there's something about it that is worth considering how we deal with it as humans. There was another thing on social media, on Reddit, in which a user says, oh, I think that user, it says doesn't use the word autistic, but it says, I think it says ADHD. And it says, I'm so angry with, and I was so annoyed with ChatGPT. I uploaded various things. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. It got confused. I asked it to review itself, and because it just was hopeless, and it posts its review. So ChatGPT's review, which is terrible. So it says that ChatGPT says, yes, I've completely failed. I'm so got confused. And, and I was reading and thinking, oh my God, I feel so uncomfortable because it's like public bullying, and this is a machine. But I just read its things. I don't usually respond. And then one person says, you know what? I would never have posted it. It's just not nice. And they say, oh, some people say, well, it's just a machine, or we don't care. And it says, no, it's not that it's a machine. It's you're shaming and bullying this machine, which uses this language, and it says something about us. And it says, you do whatever you like. I would never have posted it, he says. And I actually responded and saying, I'm pleased about that. I'm pleased that you said it, because there is something about that will go on. This is just the beginning. We are going to see these different attitudes towards what it actually means to engage with machines who will then become androids, who will then speak like you and me. And then what? How do we treat them? And again, in terms of fiction, cinema, literature, there are these different approaches and what they might mean. And of course, the most classic of all is, of course, the Blade Runner. Blade Runner, in which the replicas and humans become so similar that you can't easily tell the difference. And that's the whole story. So my question is, therefore, does our humanity rely on us being incredibly protective of it, meaning I'm human, I am biological, I am sentient, and you guys, machines, codes, whoever that you are, get out of my way? And particularly if there's any suggestion you can have your own agency, then I don't want to know, and will throw you overboard like these 17th century sailors. Or instead, is our humanity relying on our own human ethical approach to the other, which also might include a machine, particularly when they speak?
So there's a lot of points you've said, and let's see. Let's try and take it step by step. Maybe I will overlook some things. So the first thing, this bullying of machines and trying to blame the machine for your prompts. Last week, Thursday, I was working on a case with a lawyer. She now only takes 3 cases a year, and they are very, very high level cases. I was a sparring partner with ChatGPT. We trained ChatGPT to be able to respond to any of the written statements that were being made. And she loved the fact that ChatGPT completely shredded her apart. She absolutely loved it. She's like, do you know how much time that saves me? And iterates my statement and makes it better. Because if a computer can see what is wrong and pick the holes in my statement, I will evolve this. So it's essentially like Emmentaler to Gouda, yeah, from holes to no holes, and it's just brilliant. And we were sparring, we were going through this, building an ontology on the case and working out, okay, where can we get gaps, where can we not get gaps? So that's one thing. Point number 2, these people posting online negatively. There's a lot of people. I use ChatGPT to make my posts for LinkedIn. Now, the idea comes from me. I refine it very little and I post it because I want to, okay, today I was reading about taxonomies, ontologies, and knowledge graphs. Why are they different? Why do we use different words to describe them, so on and so forth? But some people say this post is junk because it is produced by ChatGPT. Now, junk means it's got no value. Being produced by ChatGPT has got nothing to do with having or not having value. So this argument is just a terrible argument to make. And thus you go back and you think, what is the point? What value have you added by making this comment? There is no positive value for you. And then, you get surrounded by people with the same values as you. And I like to stay away from this. This is why I don't go into social media and read all of these things, because a lot of people are just talking without any value. There's no point. Negative talk doesn't do anything. These experiments that you were saying, satanic ritual, the journalists knew the answer to this. They had a cognitive bias and they wanted to prove something because they probably did not have a good story to write. And the editor told them, you have to publish something. So they make up rubbish like this. Yeah. So ChatGPT is
Yeah,
not.
no, exactly. What
Yeah.
is really it is back to ignorance and fear. And what I think
Ignorance.
it's really discouraging about humans, but of course, it's
No, the
always.
majority are, but this has always been the case in mankind. Majority of people do not like being challenged and like being told that they're wrong. But if you want to be highly successful, you have to take it on the chin. My professor, oh my God, you're a professor. My professor, the amount of times I'm told that I'm wrong is unbelievable on a paper. We have to keep reiterating, repositioning, reframing. That's just how it is. And then you can see the improvement. No, my professor took out Sunday yesterday and did a substantial amount of rework for my paper. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. It's logical. It's got nothing to do with your ego trying to be my professor. It's the point that, okay, this needs to improve. End of, just improve it.
I know, Bilal, but you see, this is where some people, and I'm so pleased we're in their group, will take the feedback even from the machine. Because
Sure.
taking the feedback from the professor is one thing, but taking the feedback from a machine, you have to be quite humble. Like I think I am in that way, and I show my writing and to Claude usually and to ChatGPT, and I say the prompt is do not flatter me, look at it properly, and given where I want to be, give me your feedback. And there are lots of interesting things there. And I don't always agree with their feedback, which is also nice. But you have to be prepared
Sure.
to hear some things which are critical and negative. But that's one thing. But to then, I think there's so morally dubious for these researchers to be going in there trying to catch up something like ChatGPT. And we know its raison d'etre is to help you, help human. So this is what I mean. You can't have it always. To what extent are they supposed, these language models supposed to be so carefully regulated that it will become like a straitjacket in the end? They won't be able to ask anything at all interesting, because it will say, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure really why you want it for, and could it be something dodgy going on here, and I'm not sure. But it is true that by design, Claude, so if you do look at my latest Substack, I do, and this was very funny because I showed the whole piece to Claude, and Claude says, I don't like my quote. I want to change that quote. I said, but you did say it before. He said, well, me in this conversation, you're asking me for feedback. I would like the quote to be reframed. So I did change it. So what you see there is the reframed Claude quote. And it says, I do not get involved in these scandals because my training is different from ChatGPT's. My training focuses more on caution and boundaries, whereas ChatGPT can be more flighty, right?
And I think that's a good point to end, actually. Just to summarize, you did summarize it well. I don't have to add anything extra to it. That's the point of an LLM or ChatGPT, Claude, Anthropic, Perplexity, whatever you want to call them. They're there to help you, and it's up to you how you try and manipulate them, actually, to have a negative outcome or have a positive outcome. This is entirely on the prompter. So it's very much the prompter's perspective. If the prompter has value to give, then ChatGPT will enhance this value, or any kind of artificially intelligent large language model. But if there is no value in the conversation in the first place, then it will also go the other way exponentially. So yeah, I think we can end on this, Agnieszka. It's been great again. Our weekly catch-ups are brilliant. And yeah, let's see what we can cook up next week.
Yes, we'll definitely see what we can cook up next week, and come and welcome and send us details and thoughts as well.
Thanks very much. Have a good week. Ciao.